The following program is wholly sponsored and produced by Stu Taylor on Business, which is responsible for its content. The opinions and information provided on today's show are those of the guests and or their respective companies and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of this station. It is strongly recommended that all listeners conduct their own due diligence on all companies mentioned and or seek out the advice and counsel of a financial professional. The guests on this show may pay a fee to appear on the show and are not affiliated with the show in any manner. This is Stu Taylor on Business. Now, Stu Taylor.
All right, welcome, and a special welcome this morning from an esteemed guest we have in New Zealand, and it's 2:00 in the morning in New Zealand. So in advance, I will thank Irene Chain-Kalinowski for getting up at this awkward hour and participating in the show with a message that is very heartfelt. She has been a practicing midwife for 32 years. 8 years was spent in the Middle East. Her career, both in practice and in academia, is very much distinguished. I will let her give a little bit of a background on it. And she is the author of 3 books, My Body, My Baby, Let It Be, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery. These books, the basic publisher is Bookworld, and they're available in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. And you can go to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Bookworld.com, and easily find it. And from New Zealand, a place where I'd love to visit someday, Irene Chain-Kalinowski. Irene, good morning. It's good morning here, and it's good morning there. It's nice to have you on the show.
It's a very good morning, middle of the night, but it's very warm here. I think we've got a monsoon summer.
All right, don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. We've been having a brutally cold time here in just about all of North America. But give us a little, I gave you that brief introduction, and I'd just like you to highlight it with your background, which is most impressive, and your mission.
Okay, well, I'm actually a registered nurse, and then a midwife. I've been a midwife actually 35 years. I've travelled through continents, so I was in England, the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia. I've been working as an independent midwife in New Zealand for 17 years, and I started holistic health. I became a homeopath. And when I started to look at the mind-body connection, I was getting so many amazing results with the women I cared for.
All right, and you and I have spoken before several times, and if I have to say, someone is passionate, a real crusader, kind of a Joan of Arc for to help women going through childbirth. What is the key message or messages in this book that you want to convey, and why did you write the book? Why did you write all 3 books?
Well, the first book started, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery, was because I had student midwives, and they come out with me, and most of our women celebrate really healthy, uncomplicated births. That's 95%. 5% may have, problems, but they still celebrate birth. And my students just said to me, you have so much information. I travel through continents. So when I qualified, when I was first working in England, I couldn't understand the system because my grandmother had home births, my mother had home births, my sisters had their first births in hospital and refused to go back because in those days it was the shave, the enema, and they were strapped to beds and they didn't want to have their experiences taken away, so they had their babies at home. So when I went to the Middle East, the C-section rate was also much higher in Europe. So I went to the Middle East and I took care of the Bedouin ladies. We were first opening hospitals there. And the Bedouin ladies knew how to birth. And we had very few C-section rates. We had maybe 4%, if that, few complications. And I couldn't put the pieces together until I went back to Saudi Arabia 15 years later. And the cesarean rate was heading for 25%. And with that came westernized medicine. Of course, we had women strapped to beds, walking epidurals, but we also had the refined foods coming through. So then I looked back and said, well, why are the babies getting bigger in Saudi Arabia? What happened in England? And I went back to after the war where people were eating stodgy foods. And I thought, well, maybe it's the diet and the refined foods that's the key. So that's how I wrote The Heart and Soul of Midwifery, was to change our system and try and look at the bigger picture of childbirth. And then my niece had a very traumatic experience because she lost her control over in Australia, and she went in for a check. She was pinned to a bed. She had a baby driven. She had a C-section for the first baby, and she was traumatized for months after the birth. So and to see someone go through that, and then I looked at my family in England, long line of home birthers, and then I had 3 more nieces with C-sections, and I said, there's something terribly wrong here. And my niece said, you have to put your book out because everyone seems to be having, normal births there in New Zealand, and, with the continuity of care and holistic care, it's possible. And my niece actually had a vaginal birth at home just 8 weeks ago. And she celebrated. She had midwives with her by her side.
And you talk about the importance of celebrating this childbirth, but my curiosity here is piqued. What's the percentage of C-sections right here in the United States? Do you have that information?
Well, I had the statistical data. I think they were saying as many as 1 in 3 women are going to have a C-section. That's 30%, and 80% of women having some kind of pain relief. Which is very much different to what I'm finding with holistic care, because we have a 2% epidural rate, 95% vaginal birth rate without pain relief, or very little, maybe a little bit of the Entonox, but the women become more empowered and more well prepared. So when you provide holistic care, the women come to the clinic, or they come to see me, and we take maybe a good half an hour of preparation, and a lot of it is to do with diet.
Let's have you dispel some of the myths. I frankly, before I spoke with you, I'd hear about midwifery and childbirth at home, and I'd say, oh boy, I'd much rather have this done in a hospital. Can you alleviate the fears that people have? And then we'll look at this from a cultural standpoint from other continents. But what are the differences in terms of the health of the mother, the health of the child? And are there a number of myths that negatively portray midwifery work and childbirth out of the hospital?
Well, midwives support the normal process of childbirth. We understand the process. We understand, we learn about the contraction patterns of labor. You can visualize those, and we support nature, and especially holistic care is the mind-body connection. So women are much more relaxed. And what happens in hospitals, I see, is there's a lot of intervention. It's like a drive to get the baby out quickly. It's a drive to interfere with the process. And I think it's the lack of understanding of the process, because before I did continuity of care, I had no idea. But I see women from the beginning of pregnancy, so I know the woman, know the family, can manage their fear zones. I go into the birthing room with them so they feel safe when I'm there. And I deliver these women mainly in hospital. I could do home births, but too many women are fearful of childbirth because of all the complications. You only need to look at our special care baby units. They're full these days. They never used to be full. And, is it because we know it's because we're interfering with that very process, and women are not connected with their bodies. So they don't know what's happening. They're not educated about it.
Which is really what you're trying to do, to reach people, to educate them. Do you see any changes? We've seen the battle of academia versus business. We've also seen the other battle that's gone on for years with the traditional medical community battling homeopathic medicine, holistic alternatives. Are we progressing, or are we not? And what are you doing to continue to move that movement forward?
Well, I think the world's changing about, and I'm in touch with obstetricians around the world. I've worked with some amazing obstetricians, and I still do. And I think everybody wants to see a difference, because we're seeing that, it's not the way we have conventional medicine. It's not working. And when I introduce even the obstetricians at the hospital or the midwives and the women to holistic health, and they see the difference. And sometimes I have obstetricians calling me, what's your ideas on this? Can we help? We're all starting to work together. And, even from Saudi Arabia, I've got obstetricians that are practicing holistic health. Some of them have practiced it for 20 years. And I think we've got to get out of the picture of looking at the one thing. So it's not just the birthing room, it's the preparation. It's teaching women, actually, and husbands. And we should be teaching this at school. It shouldn't be waiting until someone gets pregnant when they're really fearful, know nothing about their body. And you've got to educate them with so much in such a short space of time. The United Nations have got a global prenatal 2014 initiative that was launched here in New Zealand. That's to bring humanity.
All right, we're gonna pick that up after a break. Do you have a website, Irene, that you can give out?
On Facebook.
All right, we'll have you give that right after the break. Rejoining us after a break will be Irene Chain-Kalinowski, the author of My Body, My Baby, Let It Be, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery. You'll want to read these books.
This is Senator Joe Lieberman. I just did an interview with Stu Taylor, and it was a great one. Just good conversation, smart, asked me some questions that people haven't asked me before about my book, and I look forward to coming back with Stu again.
All right, we are back. Stu Taylor and a lady whom I characterize as a crusader to help women to overcome the fear of childbirth, to talk about the art or the skill of midwifery. Irene Chain-Kalinowski has been practicing it now for 35 years. Her experience is just extraordinary. And I want to give you, you can reach her by going to the name of her book, My Body, My Baby. It's on Facebook. And we will be informing you of websites coming out very shortly. Her books, My Body, My Baby, Let It Be, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery, and they're all available in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. She is really a champion for women. And Irene, sorry, we had you were in the midst of giving an explanation about the United Nations in regard to childbirth when we went to the break. You could pick it up from there.
Absolutely. The prenatal initiative is to bring humanity and spirituality back into prenatal education. And it's a global event, and Julie Gerland she lives in France, but she's actually heading that campaign. There's it was the Freedom for Birth movie is absolutely showing. I think people should have a look at that if they're interested.
All right, and people should attend to this. You can always contact me if you need more information, if you're driving and you don't have it in hand. When you see the insurance companies handling this, and putting Obamacare aside, which makes things much too complex, and you're in New Zealand, I don't know how aware of it you are, but are insurance companies taking steps to cover midwifery and practitioners?
It's moving in Australia. My niece had the vaginal birth at home. She had to pay $5,000 privately to midwives because they were not covered with insurance to take the women into hospital. So, my niece would have had a baby in the hospital, but she actually couldn't take the midwives, the people that were caring for her, through the system because of insurance problems. I think that, all women should have access to holistic care, because it's not just the childbirth itself. You need a chiropractor if the baby is not in the right position. Hypnobirthing works beautifully. It's the preparation. Homeopathy fixes the mind body. It can help so many emotional issues and so many acutes in pregnancy when women don't want to take the drugs. I am a homeopath, so I use a lot of homeopathy with women. And if insurance companies just open their eyes and they provided this, even governments where we get free health care, if they provided this for women, made it accessible to everybody, just not the elite, the premiums would drop. Actually, the premiums would drop. That would make insurance available and cheaper for everybody if somebody doesn't get too greedy with it.
How does childbirth differ? You go across different continents, and you've had experience just about everywhere. The UK, the Middle East, where you spend a lot of time, New Zealand, where you live. Can you cite some of the differences?
Well, childbirth's not changed since the day we were created. You know, babies come out the same way. It's the way it's interfered with globally. In India, for example, a lot of babies are induced or C-sections on their due date. The same in China, such high cesarean rates. You know, when you work with nature, the body knows what to do. It releases all its own hormones, its endorphins. The uterus knows when to contract and what type of patterns to give contractions to get the baby down there. It's an amazing thing if we just keep our hands off and work with it and prepare women. I think it's the fear zones. The hospitals are fearful of childbirth. The caregivers are fearful of childbirth. And more so, I teach holistic practices to midwives, and I'm quite concerned about how many caregivers are not in tune with their own bodies.
So the real issue is education. You know, President Roosevelt said years ago, the only thing to fear is fear itself. Is the mind so powerful that the greatest problem we have confronting women going through this is the fear that you have to educate them to work out?
Absolutely. I can give you an example. I had a woman that came in with lots of urine infections, the symptoms of which she didn't have urine infections, and lots of pains and discomfort down there. And if you look at the chakra system, you know, if the first thing you look at down there, I said to her, have you had a fallout with your boyfriend this week? She says, how do you know? I says, well, that's relationship problems down there. So you can actually gear into it. You know, you get lots of tribal influences, and tribal can be work, it can be family. It's usually the bowel. It affects the bowel, and if people are struggling financially, it affects the back. So you get backache. So you know you can actually link all these things together and see where these problems are, and make important lifestyle changes and support with things like homeopathy for the emotional sphere, the counselling, you know, all those wonderful things you can do to get well women that celebrate birth and health. And we actually treat the whole family, because it's not just the woman that comes into the room. You find you're fixing the mother who's got high blood pressure because you're talking to her as a person, you know. And then and then there's the other children in the family that might be there, where they might have had a few asthma attacks, and you can actually help them holistically. And, you know, the holistic care alongside conventional, because sometimes the damage is already done. So sometimes you need conventional medicines, but if you use the holistic next to it, you can wean off conventional medicines. And that's the beauty of it.
Do you feel our whole education system has to be changed or just honed and tuned up? I mean, do we need a dramatic and profound change in our education system?
I think it means that caregivers need to be educated about the mind body. They want to do it, but they don't actually. They're not taught the chakra system, for example, to see how the body reacts to stress, which parts of the body. I think that would be a good start. And I'd love to see that taught in our universities, to just so we all get our mind body connections back into gear again. I mean, if a car's not tuned in, it's going to break down. Same with the mind and the body. We have to go back. Even sometimes our midwives are trained very medically. It's like, you know, you have a clinic appointment, you do all the referral blood tests, but there's a lot of preparation. I was never taught about diet at all in my midwifery training. So it wasn't until I was looking after lots of Asian women and finding they were having a lot more complications, and when you just change the diet around, you don't get many people with high blood pressure problems, you don't get many people with the toxemia of pregnancy, and you don't get many complications at all with the right care.
Do you recommend yoga, meditation, other sources to enhance the mind-body relationship?
Absolutely. I think, you know, everybody's unique. Some people are very spiritual and they are all into that, and that's fine. And even if people are not totally, you know, spiritually minded, if they take care of themselves and just start to get in tune with themselves, you know, it's very quick. Women come to me and they're stood there.
Got about 10 seconds.
Okay, and they take they take medications, Panadols quickly, and then because it's a quick fix. But instead of saying, well, why?
Okay. I want to thank you, Irene Chain-Kalinowski. The books, My Body, My Baby, that's the one to check. There's also Let It Be, The Heart and Soul of Midwifery, all available in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. It's been a pleasure. Stay on.